everybody. Welcome to Obscure Animation. This is the show where we talk about indie animation and we try to give it its day in the sun, and it's a lot of fun. And today we are putting on our philosophy caps for a very, very deep, profound movie, or at least it's trying to be. And I'm excited to talk about it. We're talking about Waking Life by Richard Linklater from 2001. And I'm Rachel Wagner. Stanford is here.
Hey, how's it going?
How are you doing?
Good.
Yeah. Are you ready? You ready to
Well,
talk?
I think so. My mind was pushed to the limits.
Are we gonna be better friends after this recording? Come to know each other at a deep level,
or at least where we view some of the deeper questions of life.
Right.
That could even some even almost like the unanswerable questions, right, of life.
It's gonna be good. Yeah, we're ready.
Right, bring it.
Yes. So, Waking Life. Had you seen this movie before?
No, I'd not seen it.
I never had to. It was kind of on my bucket list because I love Richard Linklater.
Yeah, Richard Linklater, exactly.
Yeah. Same. And he's done 2 animated films, Scanner Darkly, and then this. And I hadn't seen either. Well, still haven't seen Scanner Darkly.
I'm embarrassed to say I hadn't seen either. Until now I've seen Waking Life. But yeah. So I definitely want to see Scanner Darkly now too.
Yeah. So this how do you even think, how do we describe Waking Life? Is basically a man is dreaming, and as he dreams, he wanders through the world talking to people about what they think about life.
Yeah, that's exactly
it. Is that accurate?
I think that's perfect. It's a perfect description, right? And I think and sometimes he's in the scene and sometimes he's not. Yet he's always a presence. You always know that this is about him, either his dreams or his, whatever is going on.
Yeah. It's kind of like an Inception in that way. Even when he's dreaming, even when he thinks he's woken up from the dream, he's still dreaming.
Yes. Yeah.
So we don't know what is going on, if he's dead or if he's just dreaming and dreaming and dreaming, or what is going on with the character. Yeah.
And in a way, I mean, well, I don't know if he's necessarily aged because we only see him young near the first of the movie, right? Or younger.
Right. Like, so he's definitely like a man. I don't know if he's an old man, though.
Well, exactly. He looks like he's a somewhat young-ish man. Maybe like 30-something, late 20s, early 30s, maybe, most of the time.
It's interesting because this movie came out before September 11th.
Yeah.
In January of 2001.
It debuted at Sundance.
Yes, and it debuted at Sundance. And it just feels like this movie is so pessimistic about, like, we've forgotten how to dream. We've forgotten what matters in the world, and we've lost ourselves. There's all this existential dread. And if they thought that was true in 2000, can you imagine?
I know, right? Well, that's a really good point, because I just wonder what Richard Linklater was thinking, and I don't mean that like, what were you thinking? But it was more just like, what was he pondering about during the creation of this film? Because the questions are super deep. And I agree with you. And that whole time period and everything is like, wow, that's really something. How that all kind of,
because the the late 90s feel like rainbows and sunshine compared to
I think again. I mean, I lived through them. I was there, right?
Me too.
Yeah, exactly. So we both were there. And I agree with you. You compare it to now, and it sure seems different. But I remember also being a really weird time, particularly like 2000, 2001, and I'm trying to pinpoint.
Well, I'm
that.
surprised that I wasn't a bigger fan of this movie, because I would have loved this movie because I graduated from college in 2002, and my emphasis was political philosophy,
Oh, my
and so
start. Yeah. So this would have been, yeah.
yeah, I loved that kind of like heady discourse, as you might
Yeah.
say.
I would have probably enjoyed it more actually like during my college days
Yeah.
too. I think now I was looking at it more. I mean, clearly, from an older pair of eyes, but uh, also uh, just the style of it
Yeah.
as well. The production design and whatnot, because the whole thing was rotoscoped,
Right.
and
Yeah. In that.
which was interesting because
Yeah.
but then in some ways, I mean, which we'll get. I know we'll get into some of that, but in some ways that made me enjoy it more, and other times it made me enjoy it less. If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Because
yeah,
rotoscoping is kind of a dirty word in the animation community, and obviously not our friends over rotoscopers.com, but the
yeah,
actual act,
the
people say, "Oh,
process.
it looks
Yeah,
rotoscoped," is kind of a ugh thing. When
yeah,
Yeah, that people say. I know, I mean, especially somebody like Ralph Bashki or somebody like that does a lot of rotoscoping. That's kind of seen as ew.
and Rachel's. I mean, this is maybe kind of bad for me to say, but I'll say it anyway. But I almost would have rather seen this film, uh, seen the non-animated film.
Mm-hmm.
I think I almost wanted to. Multiple times I think I'd rather see Linklater's footage that he filmed,
Mm-hmm.
that he digitally shot
Yeah,
for this,
because
but they rotoscoped on top versus what we were seeing,
yeah,
on screen.
yeah, because they shot the film and then they rotoscoped over it, which means basically kind of tracing over. But
Hmm.
what they did in this movie is they actually drew on top of the lines from the
Yeah.
rotoscoping, and so there was like a uh, hand drawn kind of feel to it all,
Hmm.
rather than traditionally with rotoscoping. You use a light box and you use cells and you copy the animation. I mean the live action. And the thing, I guess, that even though I love animation, I don't really see what makes the animation matter. Like why we needed to do the animation. Like
Yeah,
what's the point?
I agree with you. Frankly, to me, it almost felt like it was a barrier into what was going on. I felt like I was looking through a window that had been colored on or painted on, but I really wanted to see again what was what was going on behind it. Again, what Linklater had actually filmed. Uh, just because I didn't really just. I mean, I found it interesting, and sometimes I think it helped with the philosophical discussion that
Mm-hmm.
was going on. During the discussions that were going on during the film. But
Yeah.
yeah, a lot of times I just found it was a combination of distracting, yet also sometimes kind of interesting in that, like, instantly, for example, when I see, you see like Ethan Hawke or whatever. I mean, and you know who it is. Like, oh, okay, I know. And
Mm-hmm.
then same with when Richard Linklater shows up in the final portion. I mean, like, like, oh yeah, that's Richard Linklater, and so that was kind of cool. I mean, there was like no doubt, of who
Yeah.
it was. The way that they were drawn, but yeah, I found the animation frankly more distracting than I did like enjoyable or yeah,
Yeah. I mean,
beautiful or yeah.
they they're obviously trying to use it to make it feel more dreamlike,
Yes, exactly.
but since most of the imagery is people just sitting and talking, it doesn't really help that much.
Hmm. Yeah,
Like if we think of
and
other
the
movies that are
faces.
heavily rotoscoped, like I don't know if you've ever seen Waltz with Bashir,
Yeah.
which is a war documentary type movie that is by Ari Fullman, that is done through mostly rotoscoping.
Rose. Yep.
And I feel like in that one, it's really trying to paint this almost nightmare scape of war through the animation that's not
Hmm.
quite the same, whether it be because there's something about live action, even though it's obviously horrific to see the images of war, it can become kind of routine, like, oh, it's a war movie. And so like by having like yellow sky, it just kind of makes it a little more memorable. And
Yes.
so I think it works there to have the rotoscoping. Here I just don't know if it really, like, I didn't hate it or anything, but it just doesn't add a whole lot.
Yeah, I
And
didn't
so
think
it
it added.
feels kind of like, why. I agree with you on that. That's what I said in my notes. I said, what does it add to the story to be animated?
Yeah, I think you hit it. I mean, it seems to me the dreamlike, to make it feel more dreamlike. But then again,
Mm-hmm.
I think that could have been accomplished with
Mm-hmm.
live action too.
Yeah. So it did premiere at Sundance, and
And it feels to me, I mean, it kind of
yeah,
felt to me like a
yeah,
Sundance movie of the
it
late
does.
'90s,
It
early
does.
2000s, don't you think? I mean,
Yes.
it just seems like it just. I bet it was a hit at the festival.
Yes. In fact, there was a an animated film that is interesting and that people should check out. That was also rotoscoped at Sundance this year. So, 20 years later, it's kind of interesting. A movie called Flea,
Oh
that
yeah,
people should take a look at. About a, it was a really good movie about a Afghan man who shares his story and how he ended up. Um, he's a gay man, and how he ended up coming out to his family, and it was really good. But it's kind of interesting that you see that uh, 20-year kind of journey for this kind of a film
yeah.
at Sundance.
I felt I saw Flea too,
Oh, you
and
did? Yeah.
I did. Yeah, Sundance from home.
Mm-hmm.
The and Flea really took advantage, I thought, of of
Mm-hmm.
the animated, format, for lack of a better word.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it really helped with the storytelling, and also it was really interesting to look
Yeah.
at. I think part of the thing for me with this film is that, um like, the animation was almost like a one trick pony. I mean, it was just the same
Yeah.
thing every and only a couple times. Like, there's one thing kind of near the end. Not to give anything away, or because we'll get there, but there's like an exterior shot of the house, and the
Mm-hmm.
house is like moving. Kind of they did some interesting things. It's just subtly shifting, or
Yeah.
different portions of it are shifting, and I thought, okay, that looked really cool. Rather than just kind of a close up of a face, that's done in a
Mm-hmm.
pretty flat style.
Yeah.
You know,
And there was
um,
a point also where it goes to just black and white,
yeah,
and I thought that was kind of striking.
hmm, yes,
But um, yeah, and just about Flea, there's a point in that movie, not to give any spoilers or anything, but where I was so sure that he was going to be judged harshly by, I think it was a brother or sister, I can't remember, but I was so sure.
I think
And
it
then
was his brother, or
yeah, his brother.
kind of his whole family, right?
Yeah,
His siblings.
and he like gives him a hug and just says, I was just like, oh, because I was just like preparing myself for this harsh judgment, and then
Yeah,
he
they
was
had
so
really
kind and loving, and I was, oh,
set up.
made me
Yeah.
so happy. But anyway, it starts out with a couple thoughts. I mean, we could talk for days about a lot of these sort of speeches, and I would have no argument with anybody who found this movie incredibly pretentious, because I think it is incredibly pretentious. But that doesn't mean it doesn't have something interesting to say.
Yeah.
So I'll just say that outright. We had, in my criterion project, we give a pretentiousness scale, 1 to 10, and this would be very high, I think, no question. But
That's
so
great.
he says you come on this earth with a crayon pack. You may get a 6 pack, 12 pack, 16 pack, but it's all about what you do with the colors that you have. So, I mean, what do we think about that? Because there is sort of a slight there's a slight creationist slash Christian, I think, element to, because I think Richard Linklater is a Christian,
Uh-huh.
and I think there's a slight element to that here, while also still trying to be really existential, and that we are endowed with gifts and from our creator, basically.
You bring up really good points, Rach. First off, I'm glad you brought up that crayon quote,
Mm-hmm.
because really so much of that animation, I mean, it was done digitally, but it almost looked like a crayon
Mm-hmm.
kind of design, as far as just the way that the way they use the colors and the way that they drew the lines and whatnot. So anyway, I thought that was interesting. But the yeah, it's what was interesting to me, because initially I thought, because I went into this movie pretty cold.
Mm-hmm.
I knew it was good. I knew it was a little bit what I was getting into, but uh, for some reason, I just immediately, and I know what happens when you assume, but I assumed that Linklater was probably atheist. So that was
Mm-hmm.
very interesting to me. Like, no, he's actually believing that there is a
Mm-hmm.
God, and
Yeah.
that to me was uh, kind of a happy discovery.
Mm-hmm.
Being a believer myself and not having
Yeah.
to think that, oh dear, what kind of arguments are they going to be presenting in the
Right.
film?
Yeah, and he talks about creation seems to come out of imperfection, which is interesting.
Yeah,
Obviously because most people believe God is perfect. So how can creation come out of imperfection? But we are imperfect. So what anything that we are going to create is going to come out of imperfection.
yeah, and uh, what kind of a trippy thing to
Yeah.
just discuss
Yeah.
in a film like this. Yeah,
Yeah, and I think I read somewhere, I think it was Ethan Hawke who said that Linklater likes to listen to people talk, and we all know that is true from from Boyhood, and from and from Days of Confused, and from the Before movies. It's a lot of talking. He loves it,
he loves it. Yeah, absolutely.
and
And this
I
movie's no exception.
no, and I think that he connects with people on that level of just that sort of, he wants to listen to hear what you have to say, as opposed to kind of really preachy kind of dialogue. That's not
Yeah,
really, it's more conversational than that.
yeah, because
No.
exactly, because I agree with you, Rach, on because I felt it was pretentious,
Yeah.
but not preachy,
Right. Yeah.
which again also kind of an interesting approach, because it'd been so easy to go into super preachy, let me hit you over the head with my philosophy
Hmm.
kind of mode. But instead, I felt like he was, opening up to, yeah,
Hmm.
just a very
Yeah.
philosophical discussion.
Do you have a favorite Linklater film?
Uh, yeah, it's probably Boyhood.
Me too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do love the Before movies, so that would be
Yes.
a
Oh,
hard
absolutely.
competition
Yeah.
in my head between those. But Boyhood was just something really special, and I was lucky because I went into it really not knowing anything about it.
Oh, cool.
Because I saw it pretty early on,
Yeah.
and I was just like, "Oh, this looks interesting." And then I think people, by the time it had the Oscar run, people were, I don't know, I think people were wanting it to be a movie that it just wasn't. And
Yeah. I can see that. I saw it. I saw it pretty early on in this run too. Although I had
Mm-hmm.
read some reviews, so I was aware
Mm-hmm.
of of the time period that it
Yeah,
took to actually make the film. But
because
still,
it's just
it
about
felt like
this.
a real revelation watching
Yeah,
it.
I just loved it, and it was all about. It made me think of all the little small moments of truth, moments of clarity that I'd had with different people in my life, and especially at the end when she is just basically like, my life is over, like everything I've worked on is done, and now, and he's like, I'm not dying, mom. and, and like, I totally related to that moment, where it's just like, even though I don't have kids or anything, you just have those moments where you're just like, okay, this is it, this is one
Yeah,
of those key moments of life.
yeah. And I wondered if he was attempting to do some of that in this film in a way,
Mm-hmm.
in its own way. And I felt again wanting to see a live action version of
Yeah.
it because I thought that would just help sort of speak to me more, just given again the kind of crayon, uh,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. He.
but also interesting to look at it in hindsight too. We've seen, of course, some of Linklater's later work, and then we see something that he did, earlier on, that 20 years
Mm-hmm.
ago, that was
Mm-hmm.
really uh, different.
Yeah. It's interesting that two of the most abstract, thoughtful filmmakers of the last, I don't know, period of time, with Terrence Malick and Richard Linklater, both have sort of a creationist perspective, which I think is interesting.
I do too.
Yeah.
And you know, not that everybody has to think the same way, but I kind of love it.
I
I
do
mean,
too.
just because it seems that to me seems so refreshing.
Yeah, it really is, and it's just this, I think, is actually not very cynical, and I don't think Malick's work is cynical either.
Hmm.
I think that there's a hope in both of their works, that while both can seem pretentious, there's a hope there, and in this movie, Linklater talks a lot about communication and about language, and he says at one point, says, we use a system of symbols to communicate all the abstract and intangible things we are experiencing. When I say love, the sound comes out of my mouth and it hits the other person's ear, travels through this Byzantine conduit in their brain, through their memories. They say they understand, but how do I know they understand? Because words are inert, just symbols. They are dead. So much of our experience is intangible, and so much of what we perceive can't be expressed. It's unspeakable. So basically, when I say I love you, you hear it and you think about what love means to you, and then you process it in to say, okay, I understand what that means.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
what again, what kind of an interesting thing to try to explain in a film.
Mm-hmm. Right.
you know,
Right.
and yeah, I just again, and so none of the concepts necessarily blew my mind, other than the concept of that Linklater believes in God. That's the one.
Mm-hmm.
That's the one thing again that was so surprising to me. But yeah, how did you feel with these multiple kind of explanations of how life works? According to Richard Linklater. Uh,
Yeah, I
did
mean,
you
it's
did you agree
interesting
with him, or did you what were your thoughts on
because
that?
he also talks about the problem of free will.
Yes,
How can we be
exactly.
free if God already knows what you are going to do? The physical laws are trustworthy, but we are just physical systems too, and our behavior isn't going to be an exception to these laws. Whether it is God or physical laws, there's not a lot of room for freedom. So basically, like, we are held back by, like, we can't, there's certain things we can't do because of gravity, because of physical laws that prevent us from making those choices, right? But then also there are spiritual laws that that will keep us from progressing the way that we want to progress if we violate those laws. The spiritual laws, basically, is what he's saying. Like, if we murder somebody, then we won't progress as a human. We'll stop, right? There's certain things that stop our free will. And I don't know, it's interesting because you have the man in jail who's super angry and just screaming, and he has lost his free will because of his choices.
Yeah,
It's interesting.
interesting representation
Mm-hmm.
of that. Yeah, of that concept, and that fine. I really should have timed it, Rachel. But when Linklater was at the pinball machine,
Right.
I mean, that seemed to me like it was 30 minutes,
It
but
was
I'm sure
really
it was. I'm sure it wasn't. But talking about, again, the whole uh, like illusion of life and the interpretation of time and and God's involvement in it all again, and Richard Linklater, plays that character. I mean, and I
Yeah.
don't know if it was just really just playing himself. I don't know, but
Well, and
he had a lot to say.
he creates quite the argument for cinema. What do you think about
Yeah,
that? He says,
yes,
he talks about the holy moment. It's cinema in its essence is about reality. Reality is reproduced. It doesn't have the imagination of literature. So, where, let's say I can read a book and have a totally different vision of what that story is, because say I read a book and I picture, say I read Tom Sawyer and I picture Tom Sawyer with blonde hair, right? And then you could read it and you could picture him with brown hair.
yeah,
And we'd have a totally different story, with, whereas if I'm watching a movie, he has brown hair. That's it. Right? So the reality is reproduced, and then we go with them on that uh on that journey, and then we get that holy moment where we see something reproduced that mimics our own experience. And
you,
yeah, which was
you said
interesting.
that's what
He
I heard.
also says that what do you think about the chimpanzee? So the gap between Plato and Nietzsche and the average human is greater than the gap between chimpanzee and the average human.
Yeah, I, yeah.
Yeah.
Again, pretentious, right?
I also really liked this line where he says, there are two kinds of sufferers in the world: those who suffer from a lack of life, and those who suffer from an abundance of life.
Yes, I like that too.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the things, and I appreciate so much that you're sharing these quotes from the film, just because I think that's so helpful to help in describing it, right?
Yeah.
But I think probably even though there is a somewhat of this through line, uh, it's again like just these series of vignettes that are thought provoking, yet not necessarily like, okay, now again, is there a through line? Is he really trying to prove a point?
Yeah.
That throughout the film, or because by the time it ended, it almost. I mean, this is a film we recently talked about. In a lot of ways, it felt to me like it's like an Alice in Wonderland type of thing,
Right.
in that it's all these different things that maybe are connected, but really, but are they? I wasn't.
Yeah.
I wasn't
You
sure.
could almost have like a Sunday school class about each one of these little meetups, right?
Exactly. Yes.
And because they all have something different, which I think makes it interesting and keeps it from being too insufferable.
Yeah, that's true because it did kept
Mhm.
changing. It wasn't like the same point was being brought up again and again and again. It
Mhm.
wasn't. It wasn't. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the setting would change and the actors would change.
Yeah, what do you
And
think about seeing Jesse and Celine from before movies?
yeah,
That was kind of
uh,
fun.
it was fun. Yeah, it's just kind of unexpected, a little unexpected treat.
Mhm. Yeah.
And-
They said, "Maybe I only exist in your mind. But I'm still as real as anything else."
yeah.
And that feels like something especially Jesse would say.
Oh, I was gonna say yeah, it didn't
Yeah.
seem the way they were talking was foreign at all because it
Yeah.
wasn't, you know.
Right. Kind of agnostic as far as politicians. He says, "Do you want the puppet on the left or the puppet on the right? Let me," he says, "let my own lack of a voice be heard." And then the character literally lights himself on fire
Yeah,
rather than vote.
yeah.
So, again, that was before 2001.
Hey, holy smokes! Yeah.
And he also, the politician in the car with the
Hmm.
speaker, and he says, "We should not submit to dehumanization. I want freedom. It's up to each of us to be set free." So, yeah, which is interesting when you think about
Yeah, you
you
know.
think of everything that's happened since 2001.
Oh my,
It's
oh my goodness!
not to get too political, but that's just interesting.
It is interesting, and I didn't necessarily feel like he was being prophetic or anything,
Hmm.
but you know, he was in a way holding up a mirror to society. I think into the time period,
Hmm.
but also it also again just felt like these are just a series of questions that he was just had been asking himself, or he'd been just compiling and then just came up with a way
Yeah.
to present it and then animate it,
And he was just about to start on Boyhood, because
right?
Boyhood came out in 2014 and it took 12 years to make. So
Yeah,
he was just about to start that next year. And he says, film is a record of God. It shouldn't be based on the script. It should be based on the person, which is Boyhood.
yeah. I was gonna say that's just the perfect description of Boyhood.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah. And I mean, it is kind of interesting because when you think about it, like he is known for his scripts.
yeah.
And he says it shouldn't be based on the script, but yet the scripts are so interconnected with his characters. The person is the script.
Hmm.
Kind of made me this movie. It made me think a little bit about Defending Your Life. Have you ever seen that?
Oh yeah,
I
Albert
absolutely
Brooks.
love it.
Yeah, I love that film.
It's one of my favorites, and I just love when he gets to his hotel and it's in the afterlife, and it's like the Continental. It's like from the 70s, everything. He's like, and then he goes over to Meryl Streep's
Oh,
hotel.
she's got like this. Yeah.
He's like, "What is this?" I love that movie. It's so
Yeah,
good.
that's a
And
good.
he's
That's a
watching all the different lives that he's lived over the years at the movie theater.
yeah,
And it's I kind of have a similar feeling of here.
yeah. It does. And I think to defend. I think advantage goes to defending your life in a way, though. In that
Yeah.
it has a. I'm calling it a throughput, Rachel, but maybe there needs to be a better word. But a, a point of view that carries through.
Hmm.
Again, not that that's what Linklater was trying to do, because again, I think he had multiple philosophical things that he would just put in the mix.
Yeah.
Uh,
Plus,
but
Defending Your Life is just so friggin' funny. It's
it's just so
hilarious.
funny
And a
and
romance.
so satisfying. Yeah, there's a great romance and a great character arc, and all that. So very different,
Yeah.
very different in that regard. But again, in Waking Life, I didn't really feel like there was a character arc.
No.
The only, you just see the changes in that main character in that near in that scene near the opening where he's levitating, trying to, and he grabs onto
Hmm.
the handle of the car,
A
and
very
then
similar movie that I think has more of a narrative that people should check out that's just in theaters now is called 9 Days. And this is a movie I saw 2020 at Sundance. And it's about basically like a clearinghouse in the afterlife where this man decides whether people get to move on to the next step, next phase, and
yeah,
he gets to see their life, and he gets really invested in sort of their choices, and there's something that happens with one of his people that he's been watching that he just can't understand, and it's really good. People should check it out. It's right in theaters, I think, either right now or close to.
I think,
um
yeah, I think it's playing in some local theaters, at least here in
mhm.
Salt Lake City.
Yeah, you'd
Yeah,
like it, I think. But
yeah, I'd like to. I'm glad to hear it.
yeah,
Thank you for the info because
yeah.
it sounds interesting. Yeah,
I love movies about the afterlife and about like thinking about these broader themes. Like I love Our Town. It's one of my favorite plays. I love the a movie called Afterlife by the great Japanese filmmaker Hirokazu Korida. And it's great. And it's coming out on Criterion this fall, which I'm so excited because it's been
oh
out of
yeah,
print. Yeah. So
I saw
keep an
that in the
eye on that.
Criterion announcement.
It's so good. But I don't know, I love those kinds of films. And he says in this movie, he says that confront the familiar, society is a fraud, and then he says, I guess it's up to me, I'm the dreamer. So that's kind of his challenge to all of us, is that sort of this idea of sort of society that stops us from doing things sometimes because we don't want to be embarrassed or whatever, we don't want to fail, that we need to confront the familiar, that society is a fraud, and that it's I guess it's up to me, I'm the dreamer.
Which
So
is a positive, hopeful message, I think, and then
yeah.
empowering message. Uh, what did you think of the ending?
Well, he says Kierkegaard's last words were "sweep me up," and if we know Kierkegaard was actually an interesting, talked a lot about faith in his. It was interesting that he brought Kierkegaard up.
Kierkegaard into the
Yeah, because Kierkegaard talked about the perfect leap of faith. And that was the only, otherwise, if you were going to take the leap and you weren't going to go all the way, then it was basically nonsensical. The only way to have faith is to take the perfect leap. And so I think that's maybe a little bit what he's talking uh, about, is that sweep me up into that perfect leap. Um, and he dreams of dancing and music, and uh, he also talks about the Book of Acts being as described by Philip K. Dick.
yeah.
And so there really is a lot of religious kind of dogma in this movie.
I was wondering about the symbolism of grabbing onto the handle of the car, and
Mm,
if that even is a symbol, because again, we see this happening twice. Once when the main character is young, and then when he's in this kind of his 30 something state, which we see him for most of the film.
yeah.
But uh, when he's young, he was able to grab on, but it also seemed like that there was a spot to grab. It almost, the way it was animated, it was hard to see for me if as an adult he wasn't able to, as he starts levitating and he wasn't able to grab onto the car. But
He's
uh,
flying at the end.
he's flying, yeah. And I, you know, I guess I just wasn't necessarily sure how to interpret that because again, I wasn't sure that he was necessarily dying. Maybe he was, but it almost seemed like he was now going off to higher ground or to a different experience. I don't know. That's what I wanted to get your take on that. I just wasn't
Yeah.
sure how to interpret it.
I think that, I mean, because they are talking about Kierkegaard's last words, sweep me up, and then he's flying. I think that he also says that the story is moving from the no to the yes. Everyone gets to the yes in the end. So I think that's what he's saying is that uh, basically there's an illusion that we have all the time in the world and take advantage of. It says life was raging all around me and every moment was magical. All that really mattered is connecting with the people. And that's when he says Kierkegaard's last words were sweep me up.
Yeah.
So I think that that's what he's saying is like take advantage of all of the time that are that you have and really listen to people and connect with them and um and try to listen and some of that is through cinema. At least he says film is a record of God, which I think is interesting.
Mm-hmm. I do too.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that I guess that's what they're flying off into heaven. I guess I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't know. And again, maybe that's the point too. Again, it's not supposed to be necessarily clear or subject to
Yeah,
interpretation,
I guess
but
that's his drawing with a 16 pack of crayons.
crayons. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. Like you said, creation seems to come out of imperfection. But yeah, I mean, I this is one of those movies I could totally understand why people might not enjoy, um, because it is very pretentious. But uh, I
Well, and
I enjoyed it, and I certainly enjoyed talking about it.
yeah, I
I thought it
enjoyed
was
it.
really
I mean, I
fun.
enjoyed it too, and yeah, it really helped me to talk about. Thanks for helping me process through it.
I think I
But
did too.
uh, yeah, it's a one of a kind type of film. Definitely, an art film uh, that is thought provoking. Maybe not necessarily, enjoyable, but that's not what it's trying to be either. It's just I think it's a movie it's all about expressing thought and trying to help you think
Yeah,
uh, versus be tell you a story and be entertained.
it's good every now and then to watch a movie like this to
Well, I
kind of.
agree, and I don't know if this is a fair comparison, but it also reminded me of some Woody Allen films
Mm-hmm.
too. That maybe some of those have a little more plot in them, but Woody Allen's always bringing up philosophers and
That's
different
true.
philosophies, uh, and it made me
Yeah, if you think about
uh,
some of the discussions in Midnight in Paris,
yes,
or even in
exactly.
Manhattan.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
I know Manhattan has its stuff that doesn't age well about it, but I actually like that better than Annie Hall.
Oh man, Hands. I think I really, it's a very good film. I
Yeah,
think.
especially when he
Yeah.
says when he gets mad at them for talking about about things being overrated. He's like, "What?" I laughed so hard at that. That was so funny. but but yeah, I think we'll have to one of these days watch Scanner Darkly because I've never seen that one, so it'll be
Yes.
interesting to
Yeah, I
watch.
want to watch it. I want to watch it too, and I just want to watch. I make sure I've seen all of Linklater's films.
Hmm.
This didn't make me like him any less. Again, I was just saying I wanted more. I wanted
Hmm.
more. Just I wanted more
Yeah,
of, of, of him rather than of the crayons.
yeah, and I think that it's one of those movies that probably would be more palatable as a short, and I think
Yeah,
that a lot of Sundance movies are that way.
I did too. I was gonna say it seemed. it honestly seems to me like it was a perfect Sundance movie.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
uh, but yeah, I agree with you. I would rather have him as a short, but that's just my
Uh,
personal taste. You
I
know,
think that's a lot of films that I watch at Sundance, or that you wish that there could be like a featurette if that was still sort of
right?
palatable.
That's just some sort of thing.
Because
Yeah,
I think there's a ton of those movies that would be just perfect as sort of a
yeah,
little
like kind of
film.
25 minutes sort of
Yeah.
deal. Is that
Yeah. Or 30, something
30?
like
Yeah,
that. Yeah. But alas, that's not marketable anymore. But it's I'd be interested to see if he could take another crack at a if not an animated film, something kind of
yeah,
like this, because
exactly.
the last few movies he's done have been a little more mainstream.
Yes.
That he's done. I mean, since Boyhood, a movie called Last Flag Flying, which I actually liked. He did Where'd You Go, Bernadette, which I did not like.
Yeah.
um, and Everybody Wants Some, which was I enjoyed that very much.
Yeah. I enjoyed that one too.
And then Boyhood, Before Midnight, and he had a really weird movie called Bernie that was very strange.
Yeah, that's one I need to see. I
Yeah.
haven't seen that one.
But then he has some more mainstream, like School of Rock, which is fun.
Oh yeah,
So,
total blast.
mhm.
Yeah,
So he's a great one of our great
he's
directors.
just yeah, it's a fabulous director. Yeah,
I'll never forgive the Academy for picking Inarritu over over
over him.
Linklater. What?
Yeah,
Oh my gosh.
yeah.
So anyway, let us know if you have seen Waking Life. What did you think of it? Did you like it? Do you think it's pretentious and too much for you? I can
Yeah.
understand
What is the meaning of
that.
life?
Yeah, what is the meaning of life and dreams?
Yes.
Put in the description. I mean, in the comment section, we'd love to hear, or on Twitter. And this was a lot of fun, Stanford. Thank you. And
Oh, thank you as always for encouraging us to watch really unique and cool
yeah,
movies.
yeah, it's so much fun. So, where can people find you on social media and your podcast and everything?
Yeah, on Twitter, I'm at Stanford Clark. Instagram at movies PAP, and my movie podcast and blog can be found at
Great.
moviespastandpresent.com.
Great. And you can find me at Rachel's Reviews, all over social media, iTunes, YouTube, and on Rotten Tomatoes. So please check that out. And if you are listening on iTunes, please leave your ratings and reviews. It really helps us out. And if you are listening on YouTube, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. We appreciate that so much. We also have our Patreon group, which is a ton of fun. And we really appreciate that support there over the Patreon group. We also have our merch store, which has Animation Junkie shirts. So please take a look at that. We appreciate that so much. And if you have any suggestions of what we should talk about in future obscure animation, indie animation episodes, just let us know. We would really appreciate it. And we'll talk to you all later. Have good
Bye.
dreams.
Yes.
Bye.